With that said, we will move into our first story here, which is related to something that definitely has not been consistent. U of I acquisition of Phoenix University. So if you're a regular listener of the show, you've heard us talk about different bills related to the library harm material bill or the needle exchange bill or some other form of a bill, because there's been a lot of big ones that have moved through the legislature this year. But something that has been brewing in the background with the Idaho legislature and the University of Idaho. As many of you may remember from listening to the midweek report, the University of Idaho has been working towards acquiring the University of Phoenix, which was going smoothly with a unanimous vote from the Idaho State Board of Education, but has recently run into issues, from Attorney General Raul Labrador's lawsuit to the Idaho House passing a resolution to say that the vote was void. In this segment, we'll give you guys an overview of the two universities, the timeline of the events, and then discuss whether what the House is doing is right. But starting off with that first, John, you want to give people context about the University of Idaho and Phoenix?
Yeah, so for those new to the state, or someone like me who doesn't keep up with university news, the University of Idaho was established in 1889. It's Idaho's oldest public university, and it serves as the state's land-grant and primary research institution. It's a public university because the state government funds it, and it's a land-grant university because it was established with the aid of land grants from the U.S. government. On the other hand, the University of Phoenix is a private, for-profit university that specializes in online education. It was founded in 1976 with the goal of providing higher education opportunities to working adults who might not be able to attend traditional college classes due to their job schedules or other commitments. In recent years, the university has faced criticism and legal challenges over its business practices, including a $191 million settlement with the Federal Trade Commission over deceptive advertisements. So the deal that we're looking at here, and if this whole deal went through, it would involve creating a not-for-profit entity to purchase the for-profit University of Phoenix for $550 million, with the seller providing an additional $200 million in cash that would transfer to the not-for-profit entity upon completion of the transaction. The acquisition would be financed through both non-taxable and taxable bonds separate from the University of Idaho's budgets, ensuring that Idaho taxpayers are not directly responsible for the acquisition cost. However, the University of Idaho has agreed to cover up to $10 million annually should the not-for-profit entity managing the University of Phoenix miss payments on the debt related to the transaction, with the University of Phoenix's current annual cash flow of about $100 million expected to cover these costs. So, Tyler, you want to go through the timeline of what this is going to look like?
So yeah, giving you guys kind of an overview of the timeline of events so you know where this is all lining up. In February of 2023, the University of Idaho's president, Scott Green, launched talks with Titan Partners, while the University of Arkansas was still considering acquiring the University of Phoenix. So those were all happening at the same point there. People were interested. People were mulling around there. Then on May 18th of 2023, the Idaho State Board of Education, acting as the Board of Regents for the University of Idaho, unanimously approved the creation for a not-for-profit entity to acquire the operations of the University of Phoenix. The separate nonprofit entity, New U Incorporated, was formed to facilitate the merger with the University of Phoenix. This was because of legal and financial separation, governance structure, accreditation requirements, and most importantly, compliance with U of I's nonprofit status, because University of Phoenix, as we've talked about, is a for-profit university. And then also with that, the approval occurred after 90 minutes of discussion without public comment, and the proposal to be voted on was disclosed only one day earlier on May 17th. Granted, according to Idaho Ed News, within 24 hours before the May 18th state board vote, board members received more than 24 emails urging them to vote no or go slow, so kind of something to be aware of there. Then on November 14th, the Higher Learning Commission, which accredits the University of Phoenix, formally approved the acquisition by the nonprofit affiliated with the University of Idaho. Then in June of 2023, the Idaho Supreme Court announced it would hear oral arguments regarding Attorney General Raul Labrador's open meeting lawsuit against the State Board of Education. The lawsuit claimed that the board conducted discussions about the University of Idaho's acquisition and the University of Phoenix in a series of closed meetings, which Labrador argued was against the law that requires such deliberations to be held in public to ensure transparency. Then on January 31st of 2024, so we're getting a little closer here, Raul Labrador's lawsuit against the University of Idaho Idaho/Phoenix deal was dismissed. The ruling effectively dismissed the allegations of open meeting law violations, allowing the University of Idaho to proceed closer to its bid to acquiring the University of Phoenix. The court's findings indicated that the action taken by the Idaho State Board of Education did not violate the state's open meeting laws as alleged in the lawsuit. And then we get to our last one here, which is on March 6th of 2024. So just recently, Idaho lawmakers introduced House Concurrent Resolution 26, opposing the University of Idaho's plans to purchase the University of Phoenix, raising significant questions about its legal authority, public policy, and procedural legitimacy, and threatening potential legal action. It passed the House with a vote of 49 in favor, 21 against, and 0 absent, and is moving towards the Senate currently, which... All that said, giving you guys an overview so you know what's been happening up to this point, one question I had that came up as I was researching this is how would this not cost Idaho taxpayers money? Because, the University of Idaho is mainly funded from taxpayer funds. So as I mentioned earlier, the financing for both the non-taxable and tax bonds, it's separate from the University of Idaho's budget, which brings up that whole question. The answer there, again, is a little tricky, but I'm going to try to piece it apart for me. This is the best I could kind of boil it down to, is that these bonds would essentially be loans that the University of Idaho, through the newly created nonprofit entity, would take out from investors. Some are taxable, some are not taxable. You can go into that if you want to research it, but basically... one's taxed, one's not. And then the payment on the loans would be covered by the University of Phoenix current annual cash flow, which is about $100 million per year, thus making it so U of I doesn't have to spend any money on the loans. So the profit that's being generated from Phoenix takes care of the loans that would be necessary to buy them. Granted, the University of Phoenix would be adding $200 million in cash to the $550 million overall purchase, and U of I has agreed to cover up to $10 million annually should that nonprofit entity managing the University of Phoenix miss any payments or debts related to the transaction. So basically, summing that all up, a University of Phoenix is putting a certain amount of money into it to make the deal happen. The money that U of I would be putting into it, so it's not hurting tax dollar coffers, would be brought through loans. Some would be taxable, some would be not. The non-taxable ones, you're going to have less interest, blah, 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 blah. But the risk is that if the University of Phoenix decreases in the amount of revenue that they continue to produce and they have other issues, and basically if it's not a worthwhile investment, then U of I will be on the hook to put $10 million annually in to try to help out with that debt and different issues. So, John, would you like to kind of break apart what the benefits of the merger or not would be?
Right. For the University of Idaho, that means it could expand its footprint for online education. This would allow them to reach people who normally wouldn't have gone to college. And like with any of these, there's also hope that this would generate more money for U of I. So they can put it towards other programs. And lastly, that would give U of I more products to offer to potential students, therefore increasing the potential clientele that they would have, or their student body. For the University of Phoenix, on the other hand, would be the transition to a nonprofit status. The acquisition would transition the University of Phoenix from a for-profit to a not-for-profit institution, which could help improve its public image and potentially alleviate some of the regulatory pressures faced by for-profit colleges. Those are some pros, but now the cons here. For the University of Idaho and Idaho taxpayers specifically, there are financial risks and liabilities here. Critics have raised concerns about the financial risks associated with taking on the University of Phoenix, given its history of legal challenges and the potential for future liabilities. There's also the worry that unforeseen costs could ultimately fall on Idaho taxpayers. The second thing here would be the reputational concerns. The University of Phoenix's past controversies and legal settlements could pose reputational risks for U of I. Critics argue that affiliating with an institution previously criticized for deceptive practices could harm U of I's standing. And finally, the impact on bond ratings and financial stability. Moody's Investors Service warned that the purchase of the University of Phoenix could trigger a multi-notch downgrade of U of I's bond rating, potentially making future financing more expensive and impacting the university's financial stability.
And digging into that, so we've given you that dump, which this was way more time than I want to admit to research this, because welcome to money and legalese and people not having documents. Anywho, but the 3 points for me that I took out of this and I wanted to make clear for the viewer is that I couldn't find anything particularly in this devious, we'll put it that way. But there are certain parts of this that through this process have been a little concerning of the hidden parts. One of that, as we read at the beginning, the time frame of the vote. It's announced one day, and then you have 24 hours to either know about it, to put comment on it, and or then go and try to be involved and try to give public statements. That's one part of it that just seems a little like, if you've got nothing to hide, you would probably want to tout this and be like, look, community members are supporting what we're doing, and this is a great idea, and blah, blah, blah. And look at all these people that came to the meeting and liked our thing, right? It's definitely a shady thing, and there might be something that I just wasn't able to find, but it is suspicious.
Yeah, the speed of this is a little questionable, and I can see that.
I'm wondering if it has to do because of reputation, because they're like, hey, this is a great buy, but it doesn't look great in the public eye, so let's see if we can scoot this quick.
Yeah, I could see that. I don't know. This one's kind of weird because there have been issues. Like we talked about, there have been several issues with University of Phoenix. And it makes me ask the question, and we kind of talked about it a little bit with the pros and cons. It makes me ask the question, why does University of Phoenix want to sell itself? And part of that is going from a for-profit to not-for-profit organization. Part of that could just be that they think they can make a lot of money through this sale, but also it could be that they want to divest out of something that they see as not being able to continue working. So
right.
On the surface, it looks good, but like with any other acquisition, my curiosity is twofold. One, why do they want to sell? And two, why do we want to buy?
Right.
And for the University of Idaho to want to buy it does make sense. They can reach new students. They have more ability to make money. They can
increase. Well, they can already hook into a university that is extremely experienced with online, which if you're a legacy institution, that is a scary thing to jump into.
I believe it. I mean, even for companies, that's a scary thing to jump into. I've been a part of several companies who wouldn't do remote work for a long time. And then they were forced to, and it really hurt. So, that could also be University of Idaho's desire. Maybe they see their student body decreasing because people don't want to come on campus, or they see the potential for another COVID-19 pandemic thing or whatever. And so they want to have those resources to do education from home. So there's lots of reasons for it. And I understand that. It just seems
there's something
odd,
there,
right? Like it.
Well, I think that's, that really hooks in well to the second point, which is the House concurrent resolution, which in it, when you read it, the House isn't saying that there's anything generally bad. I give generally. They do say there's something bad. That's why they have the resolution, which is basically stating that, hey, we think that the Idaho State Board stepped outside of its regulatory bounds to make a decision this broad. This should have been something that was determined by the legislature, which I'm realizing because there were so many bits with this, I tried to make sure to get it all in there. But the state board's decision, the state education board's decision to vote on this was done after the legislative session. So the legislature couldn't address or be involved in it at all, which part of the concurrent House Resolution 26 is saying, no, you should have either at least done it during the legislative session so that we could have been involved in it, or we should have been part of that voting or decision-making process because that's a big financial effect on one of the state's largest institutions, and as the governing body of the House and Senate, we should have a say in that. And so that's what the House Resolution is. But like you said, from what I was getting from lawmakers and this resolution, a sense of, well, this isn't particularly bad, but there's certain parts of this that are really sketchy. We want to pump and slow the brakes and bring more accountability to this. Same with the lawsuit that Raul Labrador gave, trying to be like, no, wait, hold, stop. This doesn't look right. Something's not right here.
Right. Something's fishy.
We don't have all the data right now yet, and we can't see an obvious. There again, like I was doing my research, I wasn't able to see an obvious reason that it was fishy, besides the way it's been handled.
Yeah, I don't know. This one's goofy, and I don't know how to feel about it.
Usually me and John, either John's like no, this is bad, and maybe we'll have a back and forth discussion, or we're both the same lane. But even with there again, to the viewer, I mean, we would love to hear what you have to say. Send us a message on Twitter. We'd love to hear your thoughts on that, because it is... It's just, But yeah, with the resolution, it just is boiling it down to that crux of, did the State Board of Education have the authority to make something this wide-sweeping that quickly without enough other oversight or input, and that were certain procedural norms bypassed? When I tried to go research if that was the case, right, the argument for that, but the charter for the State Board of Education, or for U of I, doesn't actually explicitly say in the event of a merger or a buying of another institution that they have or don't have to. And that's where kind of this ambiguity is getting in, where the legislators know you have to, but then the State Board and others, well, there's nothing that says we had to, so it'll be interesting. Right. I think this is going to be an example like we talked about last week with Scott Henderson and that whole fiasco with firearms in public places. Thankfully, we got to see that on the rear end of it, of where the courts had already gone it. There was a decision on that point. Before that point, you really couldn't have made a statement of, is this something that where legislation needs to be changed? Who's at fault here? That's where it needed to move through the courts. We'll have to see, one, can the resolution get passed, which I think the takeaway from the story is yes, it should be passed, just to at least slow the brakes. Yeah. That should be something as Idahoans we should encourage and want to have happen. And then the courts to then go through that process of, was this out of line, was it not? Hopefully it says that there were certain procedures that need to be done, and then in the doing of those procedures, more things will then come to light that then would better be able to help this either be more comfortable for the legislature and the government. But yeah, and then, I mean, boiling that then all down to what it means for people here in Idaho. If the deal goes forward, then U of I could have, I think, a really great online platform in a sense for that. Obviously, sometimes the best way to buy something is to buy a fixer-upper if you know how to fix it up. Right. And it doesn't have structural wrongs. Like, you go to buy a fixer-upper, you have it inspected to make sure the bones are good. Then you can fix it up. But it's not worth trying to fix up an institution in this example if the core pillars and components are the rotten bits, not circumstantial or small bits where, we hired a bunch of really bad people for the marketing department, and they said, hey, we have this accreditation and that accreditation when we didn't. If that's the case, then cool. You cleaned house and you got slapped and you changed your ways, and then this becomes a really great deal for U of I because the reputation's a little bit down, but U of I can then buy it, turn around, and have this really great online university that could generate revenue for the taxpayer, in theory, air quotations. But there again, those strings we talked about, which is a little bit concerning. Yeah. Yeah. Any case, I would say after going through all this, and if to give a conclusion and an application to the viewer, one, I would say that you should encourage your senators, now that it's moving over towards the Senate, because they've only got a week or two left, so you might need to really lay on the horn there to make sure it gets in line. We'll have to see where it progresses from here, but definitely some great possibilities and some other concerning procedures that have gone on with this one.